Hello everyone, this is Mustafa Marayati and this is the sixth part regarding our series of supratentorial arteries. And in this part, we are going to talk about angiography. Indeed, we are going to show multiple slides with different studies of angiography, and we will discuss the vascular supply shown. This is the first slide showing the angiography. This is called as the catheter angiography, in which we can see here, this is the cervical segment of the ICA, the C1 segment. Here as becomes the petrous segment, and then the cavernous segment over here, and finally to become the supraclinoid segment over here, the C4 segment. We can see here is the ophthalmic artery coming from the supraclinoid segment of the ICA. So this is the first branch coming off. And we can see that as it shows immediately, this is the anterior cerebral artery going around the corpus callosum as it passes pericallosally. So this should be the A2 segment, the infracallosal segment, the A3 segment, the precallosal segment, the A4 segment over here, the supracallosal segment, and finally the A5 segment, the posterior callosal segment. And also we can demonstrate here posterior to the ICA, the area to be supplied by the posterior cerebral artery. It should be over here to supply the posterior cerebral areas. And here we have to guess which each number is to which structure is pointed. So the number one should demonstrate the basilar artery. It's coming from the two vertebral arteries over here to form the basilar artery, giving rise to the two posterior cerebral arteries. The number two, we should follow its origin from this. So this structure we have, it's bilaterally, and it seems like to be an ICA, the internal carotid artery. So number five is the ICA, giving rise to the number two, which is the medial branch of the terminal bifurcation of the ICA. That should be the A1 segment of the anterior cerebral artery. And here is the anterior communicating artery. And then we have, this is the pericallosal artery. Maybe this is an A2 or A3 segment pointed as number three. The number four, this should be the ICA, giving rise to the ACA and the MCA. So that should be the M1 segment of the middle cerebral artery. This is an MRA, magnetic resonance angiography, showing that we have these two ICAs. Here we have the left ICA, and this is the left ICA, the right ICA. Sorry, this is the left ICA, and here we have the right ICA, giving rise to the middle cerebral artery. Here's the M1 segment, the sphenoidal segment, changed direction to be the insular segment, the M2 segment. Here is situated the insula. And then we have the M3 segment over here. This is the M3 segment also, passing on the opercula. And the M4 segment is not shown because it supplies the cortex. They are tiny branches, the cortical M4 segment. And then we have the medial branch going medially and anteriorly. That should be the anterior cerebral artery. And that should be the A1 segment, the pre-communicating segment. And then we have the anterior communicating artery, and then the pericallosal artery over here. That was regarding the anterior circulation. Indeed, we have a visualization here on the posterior cerebral artery as it goes here on the right side and here on the left side. And we have visualization of the posterior communicating artery as it passes from the ICA posteriorly medially to join the P1 segment here of the PCA to form the P2A segment over here. Here should be situated the midbrain. And this is the P2A segment, the P2P segment, and the P3, then the P4 segment of the PCA. The P1, the pre-communicating segment, the P2A, the crural segment, the P2P, the ambiensis segment, and the P3, the quadrigeminal segment, and the cortical P4 segment of the PCA. Here we have a 3D reconstruction angiography, CT scan, and here we have the right ICA, and here we have the left ICA, giving rise to the middle cerebral artery over here and the middle cerebral artery over here. And we have a clear visualization of the bifurcation of the MCA into superior and inferior trunk here and over here. And this should be the M1 segment. And then we have here is the M2 segment, and here is the M3 segment. Also here on the left side, we have here the M1 segment, the M2 and M3 segment. We don't see the M4 segment. And here we have the A1 segment on the left side and passing to become the anterior cerebral artery. Here we have the two vertebral arteries unite to form the basilar artery over here. This is a contrast enhanced CT scan. So it's a CT scan. We can see here is the bone of the skull. It's white in color, so it should be a CT scan. And also here we have this is the brain tissue. And we can see here there is a white vessel passing laterally. So that is supposed to be the middle cerebral artery as it's going to pass through the Sylvian fissure. Here is on the right side, and this is on the left side. The biggest artery is shown. And this should be the anterior cerebral artery going medially and anteriorly, here and here. So this point should be considered as the ICA bifurcation. Here we have the two ICAs, and we have the MCA on the left side and the MCA on the right side. This is the M1 segment, M2 segment, and M3 segment. Also here we have the M1, M2, and M3 segment. Here we have the anterior cerebral artery, the A1 segment, and the pericallosal ICA. And we have here two vertebral arteries and the basilar artery, and the right PCA, the P1, and the left P1. This is one more time. We have a visualization here on the M1 segment, an M2 segment, and the M3 segment of the middle cerebral artery going laterally. And here is the anterior cerebral artery going medially. This is the A1 segment. And here we have the P1 segment over here on the right and the P1 segment on the left, passing laterally, then posteriorly, then goes medially and posteriorly as the course of the PCA around the midbrain. This is the P2A, P2P, and the P3 in the quadrigeminal cistern. That concludes the sixth part of the series regarding the vascular supply of the brain.